Today, we'll learn about how our European ancestors got here. Whether you're looking for a passenger in 1834 or 1906, the more details you have, the easier your research will be. Many of the lists were indexed by the men and women of the WPA during the Depression. Unfortunately, some of the original lists started in poor condition. Some had illegible handwriting that was hard to read. Spelling rules were not important to them. And there were too many fingers in the record keeping process. Have you ever heard too many cooks spoil the broth? So they took it and they digitized it. Information was saved on index cards like this. People at NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, then microfilmed the paper cards, which were then destroyed. The information they recorded are, when available, is family name and given name. So family name is last name and given name is first name. Who they were accompanied by, if anybody, age, sex, marital status, occupation, nationality, if they have it, last address, last permanent address, and the destination, port of entry, name of vessel or ship, and the date of arrival. With this information, you can look for the original passenger list if it exists. Unfortunately, the project couldn't be completed for all records, like in New York, where you will not find a passenger list between 1846 and 1897 due to a fire on Ellis Island. However, customs passenger lists for those years do survive. Indexes have been created from other records as well to fill in the gaps of the NARA records. So you can find a variety of records and likely won't notice the difference, but I'm just letting you know they might be different from what you think it is. So let's see which details you need for a successful search to narrow our results. The names they used when traveling. Sometimes our ancestors would Americanize their name over time, right? So who was he when he came over? Henry or Heinrich? Miller or Muller or Mueller? Plus, many Europeans use their second or third names rather than their first names. Also, look for literal name translations. For example, if they're named Black, but they came from Germany, look for what? Schwartz, right? Was it May the Schwartz be with you? If they're from France and now they're called White, look for what? LeBlanc, exactly. And it may be under L or B, so keep that in mind. If you can't find your ancestor, maybe their name is misspelled or extremely common. That was my problem. Heinrich Muller, you know how many of those there are? Check records for their family, like brothers or cousins or in laws, and friends they may have traveled with, like church members or workmates. So if you can find any of that kind of information. Also required is their arrival date. Exact date for some sites, at least within 1 year of when they left or arrived, for others, especially if their name is common. The exact date of arrival is best and will reduce your search time. But if you don't know it, guess within a decade at least, but try to narrow it down to 1 or 2 years. If you thought you knew the exact date, but you don't find the list, search for close dates. Your ancestor may have disembarked the ship on that date, but the officials may have been delayed filing the list. For example, the office may have closed for some reason. Maybe they found a barrel of rum. You never know. The age of the immigrant can help narrow your search, especially with common names. However, you might not be able to trust the age on the list, especially for children, right? For example, a child might be listed as 10 when he's really 16. Why? It's the fare. They don't want to pay as much, right? And the younger child's fare could be half of an older child's. The Scots aren't the only thrifty people. And it could help the captain because a young child only counted as half a passenger. And so that he could have higher passenger count. Also, the ship's scribe, while making the list, may have misunderstood the interpreter or the immigrant, or the transcriber might have read it wrong. There's just so many places for error. Knowing the port of arrival can greatly reduce your research time, especially when searching after 1820. Another quest tip, see it blow in? Look for hidden sources. Any early documentation in our ancestors' lives may yield immigration information. Be sure to thoroughly review records you already have. Especially for me, it's those county histories. They go into some detail about where they came from and when. It's awesome. If they did become a citizen, look for other useful records for naturalization, like the petition, which gives lots of information, or just the index. U.S. passport applications, if they returned to the old country for a spell, like Heinrich Müller did to get his teaching certificate. He didn't need a passport, though, because they were only mandatory for U.S. travelers coming back into the country during the Civil War and during World War I. Passports were only required for all inbound travel when World War II began. Finally, look for the usual civil and religious records we always search for in genealogy, like this Indiana death record, which shows he was born in Germany. Did you know that Ancestry has purchased the rights to vast collections of immigrant information? Enter all the details you have to help focus so that your ancestor does not get lost in the potential 45,000 hits of your search. You don't want to have to look at 45,000 of them. Ancestry has a fully searchable NARA collection, but even with 2 million records being digitized every day, it doesn't have them all. You may still have to look elsewhere. NARA digitizes valuable information like 10 billion pages of text records, maps and charts, still photographs, aerial photographs, film and video recordings. Even more collections are in line waiting to become available, so they're always being added. Keep that in mind. You can search NARA record images on your free FamilySearch.org account of books and indexes. For example, click how to use this collection to go to the research wiki about the record set. Another Quest tip, to find immigration records, search the immigrant city of origin for local emigration records. Remember those requiring documents just to leave? The city often still has them. Once you find departure information, then use that to search the arrival lists. We'll show you what they could look like. Now that we know general search tips, let's look at specific search strategies for pre-1820, our earliest immigrants. Immigration then was more of a trickle than a flood, traveling in cold, damp, stinky, filthy cargo ships. If listed at all, the passengers were on the ship's cargo manifest. These lists are like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. For decades, nobody cared about them, so many have long since been destroyed or scattered in the libraries or historical societies throughout the world. Good luck. They could be at origin countries like France and Spain, or from individual states, but some were kept by the port cities themselves, like New York and Philadelphia, which are maintained in storage boxes at the state archives, like lists from 1727 through 1808 for the Port of Philadelphia, available only to Pennsylvania residents and Ancestry subscribers. So if you know somebody who lives there, take them to lunch. While archives in Madrid have lists of ship passengers in their language or English. A French genealogy society has discovered a 100-year-old card file of 50,000 names of those sailing from Le Havre from 1780 to 1840. These are being found all the time, and Family Search provides access to the images. So it's always new. So if you looked last year, look again. May have changed. PackRatPro.com is one of my favorite online databases for ships and passengers of the first great migration. The research and compilation was done by Ann Stevens, a very generous researcher. For example, click to view by passenger. Find the name and click on the ship and see the details. It's very cool. This is a similar site called immigrantships.net for transcriptions of ship documents for later arrivals. Click a link to see the data listed by ship's name, for example. That looks like this, with fine print at the bottom, which reminds us there are no universal requirements to submit a passenger list then. And when lists were made, there was no information requirement. Some lists provide personal information and others do not. So don't get your hopes too high for pre-1820. Here's another online database, Palatines to America, by the German Genealogical Society. Currently, there are about 130,000 names in the Ancestor Charts data list, which is accessible by non-members. Another online database, Saints by Sea listing LDS immigration to America. Another quest tip. When you're stumped, look at Canadian, Bermudan, or Caribbean records for border crossings. In the 1760s, one of my families came from Scotland to Virginia by way of Ulster in North Ireland and then Bermuda. In the 1910s, an in-law family came to Rochester, New York, after spending a generation near Toronto in Ontario. It's actually Oshawa, if you know it. I found records in both places, so you might not find them here. But the best information resource for passenger and immigration lists is right here behind me in our Largo Library. Philby's Index is an invaluable source edited by Percy William Philby, English historian and authority on the Star-Spangled Banner. He loves America. He did. He's not living anymore. Philby lists thousands of records compiled into each index, from original passenger lists to personal diaries. This is the most comprehensive compilation of passenger lists available. The publishers provide annual supplements as their research uncovers new immigration data. The 2006 supplement alone added 127,000 new names. The downside, each book must be searched separately. Yeah. The data looks like this: name, age, port of arrival, year of arrival, code number for the source of the information, which is explained in the front of each volume, plus page number in the source. So I'll tell you where it is. To find where Philby's and other books are near you, because we all are near this one, use worldcat.org. I search Philby's and 13 results appear in various formats and in various locations. In addition to our collection at Largo Library, you can search through Ancestry.com paid subscription. While researching passenger lists can be tedious, keep remembering this is a quest. While researching this online version, each entry has been indexed by name and is searchable by keyword. Thank you, helping me with an elusive immigrant with a common name. That is our next quest tip. Try another port. For example, you may associate them with New York. I knew this guy's family, including his great-granddaughter, who was my son's great-grandmother, were all from New York. Who would have thunk that they came in through Boston? They did. They actually arrived in Boston, but shows that the relative was in Brooklyn. Yeah. So it's like, oh my gosh, there he is. Other indexes in our PGS collection include the Complete Book of Immigrants in Bondage. The data on these involuntary immigrants and colonists come from a variety of official court records, along with these books on convicts. Our next quest tip: create a timeline and follow name spelling and addresses back to the time they immigrated to get all options. City directories are very useful for time between census. We just, at our seminar, we had one of the presentations was on timelines. They're wonderful for so many uses, especially finding your elusive immigrant or ancestor. All right, now let's move on to the second and most dramatic phase of American immigration, 1820 to 1920. Ships were now being built just for passengers. What a concept. And they traveled on scheduled dates. How cool is that? After using Philby's Index and websites and all the things that we just talked about, let's see what additional strategies we have for this golden age of immigration. As you may remember, once lists became required by the federal government, they contracted with the cities and states to process immigrants. Pre-printed forms were used to collect specific data. Most of the lists have survived and been microfilmed by the National Archives. The biggest search strategy we've covered is to know some of your ancestors' travel details, like arrival year and port, and personal details like their name used when they traveled and age. Formats of the original list or manifest varied, as you can imagine, and so did the actual information collected. Generally, the header lists the port of arrival. Ship's captain or master, they were called the master because they were master mariners. Type and name of ship, that was a bark. Port of embarkation or departure, that was Göteborg in Sweden. and date of arrival. And it looks like great-granddaughter to me, but it actually says 9th of August. You have to look very closely at them. In the body, find the passenger information, family members or others who were on the same ship, age, gender, and occupation of each adult, original country, maybe province. 10% will even list the town, country in which they intend to reside, if they died on the voyage. Recording deaths and births at sea was not required, but often notes were made on the lists at the end of the record or at the end of the form, like Suzanne here, who died on the voyage. Here's an enigma. Suzanne, her 42-year-old mother, my ancestor, Anne, also died on the voyage, but she doesn't appear on this passenger list. She was with them and she got on the ship. She just died and got off the ship before they landed. But these were supposed to have been made when they got on the ship, and she's not listed. So what's up with that? She does appear on the index, which shows that she arrived, which of course she didn't. But it's based on another passenger's journal who describes how they buried her at sea. Plus, her 8-year-old daughter, Gani, who is my ancestor, who watched the burial, grew up and told her 8-year-old granddaughter, who grew up and, as my grandmother, told me. So I heard this. It wasn't firsthand, but I heard the story. So you might need a variety of corroborating sources to get the full story. So the records here were literally wrong. This ship, John Wells, arrived in the port of New York in 1825. Can you make out the handwriting? How about now? A little better. John Clark, 56, male, manufacturer from England. His implied family, just like the census, we don't know for sure, but Mary at 53 is likely his wife, and Julia, who's only 9, is pretty young for the daughter of a 53-year-old woman, perhaps granddaughter or even adopted daughter. He plans to stay in U states, that's what it says, as does this passenger who only gets ditto. There's 3 kinds of dittos, which all means what? Same as above, that's right. Thar blows a quest tip. Search for spelling variations based on sound-alike letters and names. So search for all kinds of things. In fact, in Ancestry, use wildcards to search spelling variations. The wildcard search must contain at least 3 consonants, then add an asterisk to find missing vowels, and or a question mark to find 1 missing vowel. So writing that in showed all these spelling variations. Let's find a record using the free service FamilySearch.org, provided by the LDS Church. In the website, I click Search, then Catalog. I enter the port of arrival and click Search. I scroll down to Emigration and Immigration and click it. As soon as we see it, here it is. Scroll through that list and click on the Arrival List Collection Record, 1892 to 1924. Do you see what I mean? This is a quest. Remember this screen from searching the NARA records? I don't know if you remember it, but this time I enter his last name. Now I'm in the place to do the search. I click his name and his record opens. Scroll down to see more, or click to see the original image. We always want the original image. So right click on it to save it to your family tree or wherever you save your images. Because that's the whole point of this, is that we want to see that original record. Another record to research are departure lists from where they got on the ship. They will be in that country's language and stored in a city or county archives. Let's look at examples from Germany. I did a Google search and found this. It is the Deutsche Auswanderdatenbanken.de, which means German Emigrant Database in Germany or Deutschland, using Google Chrome. Why do I use Chrome? Because it will translate the page for me into English. Find Translate on the Google Waffle, and one of your options is to always translate websites. After accepting cookies, I click the hamburger, which is the 3 lines up in the top right. To find here that this list is from Bremerhaven, here I can find information about the records, and here I can search the database, which I click. On this page is the data entry box, mostly in German. Oh well, Nachnam and Vornam, that means last name and first name. Gender, the next one, if you see Männlich and Weiblich, that's men and woman, or either. Down below, it says period or range, a time frame, essentially. And then when you click the Viter button, you might get this, which I translated because I didn't have a clue what it meant. And it says, so sorry, no records, essentially. Oh well. But I did get our next quest tip. When you find a website with data, but you want more verification before you use it and put it into your database, save it until you can enter all the data and the source information in your tree. Don't count on it being there forever because sites change all the time. So, but it's a good place to store it temporarily until you can go back and pull in the data. And where can we have more luck? Ancestry card search of passengers sailing from Hamburg. Again, many of the records are in German. In Ancestry, we can also search for a person like H. Lieberman. In the search results, we can review the results. In the record, we can view the image and right-click and download it. So that's wonderful. Now let's examine additional strategies for the third wave of immigrants after 1920. When you've already checked Philby's website's immigration and departure lists, another source for new arrivals, like our US archives, is the British archives with lists of outbound passengers you can access, sometimes for free, sometimes for a fee. Ireland also has one. Especially when looking for Eastern European or Jewish genealogy, the best source is jewishgen.org. While not specifically for passenger lists, they help you search in various countries. For example, like Kiev, or remember when it used to be called Kiev in Ukraine, it shows all the different names that it had during all their political turnovers. Like when it was part of Tunisia, it was called Lekef. Who knew, right? And they have all those lists of names in Europe that have changed over the years. It's very cool. Also, more recent dates, add to your list of port options because there's newer ports, minor ports, also called landing sites. Indexes may exist for them, like San Francisco, where I first arrived. That was the first time I touched, well, I didn't touch it. My mother was holding me. In 1956, records from the 20th century are much more legible and even show details like number of bags that my mother had to schlep, along with two kitties, a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old. That poor woman. Do you see why she looks so bad in her picture? She looks miserable. On the same ship, which took her to Japan, but now, 3 years later, she could get Dramamine. A little sleepy was much better than complete nausea for 7 days. In the 20th century, we also started flying to America, including me from Germany, and the records reflect that. My mother on the New York State passenger list, and now me. No visa needed since I'm a citizen. Notice when we arrived, December. In fact, it was 2 days before Christmas, and we made it to Chicago to see my dad's sister on Christmas Day. She'd already put all the dinner away, and she pulled it all back out for us. That was one of my earliest memories in America. But in the early days, people did not travel in December at all. It was too cold. So, as our final quest tip and last resort, conduct a list by list, line by line search, looking especially at the heaviest travel months, starting with March, or travel season, starting with spring. You're just going to have to look at them all. Like our quest hero, once you've exhausted online resources, you may have to travel to archives, libraries, historical societies, county courthouses, and other places to look at microfilm and paper records. Even so, your adventure finding the records is still easier than your ancestors' adventure creating the records during their journey.